Hello and welcome to the detailed video guide for Aivela and Esne second boss encounter in the Gods from the Machine operation. During this time I'm going to try to tell you everything you need to know to get through this fight in story mode. There's a lot of stuff going on in this fight, so if it's your first time it can be rather confusing. The good news is there are a lot of mechanics you kind of can ignore or not follow, and it's not hugely impactful. So thankfully that makes for a somewhat confusing but not too difficult first time experience. But we're trying to explain everything and make sure you are super prepared. So there's a number of phases to this fight, and so let's get started. So this is the layout at the very beginning of the fight for the kind of opening phase. There are 8 codex droids around each point of the diamond-shaped platform, as well as in the middle of each side. The team has to kill all 8 of those codex droids because the nexus in the middle is shielded. You'll see there's an energy beam prior to the fight and from each codex droid until it's killed that shields the nexus and protects it from damage. So we have to kill all 8 codex droids, and then we need to DPS the nexus droid down to 50%. Now, an important thing to recall in this phase is that as each codex droid is destroyed, it will drop a clickable button on the ground that you can see in this screenshot. In 8-man, each droid drops 1. In 16-man, each droid drops 2. So that means there's 1 per person, and everybody needs to click it and pick it up. What you'll be doing is you'll be picking up the polarity module, which is going to be the key for executing almost all of the mechanics in this fight. Once you pick it up, you're going to get this temporary ability bar. The left is positive or white, sometimes we call it blue. The right is negative or red. And so what you're going to see as we talk about these mechanics are most of them will alternate, and you will either be targeted by an attack that has a positive or white polarity or a negative or red polarity. And without exception in this fight, if you're targeted by a mechanic that is attuned to one of those colors, if you click the button to swap your polarity to match the color, then you will either take no damage or very little. So if you're targeted by a white mechanic, you click white. If you're targeted by a red, you click red. In general, most mechanics coming from Aivela will be white, and most mechanics coming from Esne will be red. That's not always evident who's casting it, but it's evident based on the buff and the color. And this is the key to the fight. Okay, so let's see how phase 1 plays out. Again, you'll notice the Nexus, my focus target, has 8 stacks of the shield. You see those energy beams connecting each codex droid to the Nexus. We've got to kill all 8 of the codex droids. So usually you divide up the group where 1 person in 8-man or 2 and 16 are standing at each codex. So there's the clickable button. You don't have to pick them up immediately, especially if you're a DPS, and you probably need to go help tanks and healers to get down their codex. But make sure you kill them, pick them up. You don't need the temporary ability during this opening phase, but you will need it as soon as this phase is done. So I generally recommend picking them up immediately. You don't have to. So now we've killed all the codex droids, now it's the Nexus. It does this charged fire conal attack based on aggro that does relatively minimal damage in story mode. It adds a stacking debuff, which really isn't impactful. It's technically a dot, but it ticks for very little damage. So you burn it to 50%, down come the bosses, and now we're on into phase 2 and really the main part of the fight. Okay, so before we dive back into live video, which can be a little chaotic and confusing, let's look at the layout for beginning in phase 2, or some consider it phase 1 if you don't count that opener as a phase, and basically the way we're going to be for essentially the rest of the fight. So Esne and Aivela are going to come down. Esne's going to come down on the side near where you entered. Aivela will be on the opposite side. For the majority of the rest of the fight, Esne and Aivela will not be mobile. They will not move. They will become mobile a little bit later. And then we've got the codex droids are now replaced with 1 of 2 different other droids. So at the points of the diamond, we have glare droids. They have a little white circle around them, and if you get too close to them, you get knocked back. You don't want to damage them. Their primary focus is they will target the nearest player that is the opposite polarity. So these will alternate their polarity between positive, which is white, or negative, which is red. And the nearest player, when they do their polarization, that's of the opposite color, they'll target with a long, narrow conal attack that deals relatively high damage, even in story mode. And it'll either be white or red. And so whoever gets targeted with that will need to move to the side so that it's not going through the group, and match the color. At the same time, we'll also have the countermeasure droids, which are at the midpoints of each side of the diamond platform. And those guys really can mostly be ignored in story mode. They become much more important at higher levels of difficulty. In story mode, all they really do is a ranged attack that deals very little damage. It's a good idea for tanks to use their AoE taunts periodically, because the bosses are far enough apart you won't clip both bosses with an AoE. But to use AoE taunts to grab aggro and the countermeasures when you can. DPS, if you have rotational dot spread or attacks where it's easy to clip the countermeasures without losing DPS on the boss, it's handy and helpful to grab their aggro. That way those countermeasures don't all aggro to like one healer, which can be it's not a big deal, but it can be a little annoying. And then Aivela and Esne also have their primary mechanic is their polarized energy burst, which is a circular AoE attack that will be either white or red. And again, if you get it, you should move a little out of the group, match the color, and then you won't take any damage. Those are going to be the mechanics we see for the early phase when they first come down, and periodically they'll shield. And at each time they shield, we'll transition to another phase, and there'll be a few things that change each phase as we go. Okay, so let's dive back into the video and walk through the fight. Okay, so we're DPSing the Nexus. We're going to push it to 50% relatively quickly, and then each of the bosses is going to come down. Generally speaking, it's a good idea to divide your team in half, with one half of the team being primarily assigned to Esne, one half being assigned to Aivela. There's no tank swap in this fight. There's no real need for any change in positioning, so for the most part each team can stay focused on one. As you can see here, we're short manning this, so I'm on the Aivela team. What's going to happen is, again, we've got the polarized energy burst. You see the white and then the blue circles. So if you get targeted by that, move out of the group and match the color. You'll notice I'm running Vengeance, so I'm using my Vengeful Slam to clip those countermeasure adds. That's something of a habit from hard mode, but mostly to keep their aggro on me. So I got targeted by a circle. You'll notice there's a little energy orb above your head. That is a way to note what color you are. So there you see the glare energy beam. So there's a white one, a blue one rather, and a red one. So those players are moving to the sides to kite those beams. Anytime you do that, you just move to the side and match the color. And otherwise, it's largely just a tank and spank early on in this fight, other than matching those colors. If you see somebody else get targeted, match the color. As you see there, I get targeted by red, so I change to red, and now I'm good. And I'll just wait for it to go off. Now, the bosses push here at 72%. So you see here we pushed one boss a little bit early, so now we're just helping burn the other one. That's going to happen a couple of different points. So now, once they're both shielded, we transition to the next phase. The thing that's added, you see here casting, is Radiance. So this is a blue circle for Aivela and a red one for Esne. So you see their positioning here. Basically, if you're standing in either of those circles, and if you're not matching their color, you will take ticking damage. It's relatively low in story mode. So if you get targeted by the polarized energy burst, that's the smaller circle, or the long, narrow conal attack from the glare droids, those are more important because they do more damage. But anytime you can, try to match the Radiance. Also, you'll note most of us are trying to stand on the edges of the platform, so that, like right here, I'm in the red circle because I'm attacking Esne, but I'm just outside the blue circle. So that means, even though I'm not actually matching my color here, that means in general, if I'm on Esne, I want to be red and outside of the blue circle. If I'm Aivela, I generally want to be blue and outside of the red circle, unless I'm targeted by a mechanic. Again, if you screw these up, it generally isn't a one-shot. Those long, narrow conal attacks are by far the most important. So if you get targeted by those, get to the outside if you can, but make sure you match those colors. If you get targeted by more than one thing, match the conal, and you can just eat the damage from other stuff, and you should be fine. That's the part that can be confusing, is there's a lot of different colors. So here we're DPSing the bosses, and they're going to shield at about 40%. And so this next phase is where it gets a little tricky. So now the bosses are going to be mobile. Generally speaking, you probably want to hold them about where they are. What we do here is we're pulling them to the middle. So here's the purification beams, the wiper beams. You'll see here they're white, so everybody has to match, and they sweep across the platform. And so you can't really dodge them. So you got to match the color, and they're going to alternate. If you look at the glare droids, you can see how they're glowing white here. So that would give you a bit of an indicator as to what color the beams are going to be. But whatever color they are, they will alternate. So even if you don't see what the first one's going to be until you see the telegraph, the second one is always going to be the opposite. So you can see here those glares change to red. So we know the next set's going to be red, and here it comes. And that's really largely it until we get to burn phase. So let's talk about burn phase. You see here the boss is casting overdrive mode. Actually, both of them are. If they complete that cast, they heal themselves for around 7-ish% of their health, and they start doing this buffed AoE attack that you can't actually match the color of. So here we burned Aivela, now we're burning Esne. We'll do this again with do another example and talk through it. Okay, so let's see this last phase again. Again, as soon as you get below 40%, the bosses are going to be mobile, and you got to look out for the wiper beams, the purification beams. If you watch the glares on the sides, they will help tell you what color. So here they're glowing blue, so I would imagine our first set of beams is going to be white, and there it is. We match colors. Now, the push to burn phase happens when either boss triggers 8%. So in this strategy, we've got a lot of progression players. We've done this a lot. We're just grouping them up. That can be optimal. It means you're going to take a little bit more damage because you're stacking those radiant circles, but isn't a big deal. What I highly suggest is that you burn both bosses evenly to around, let's say, 12-15%, and then you pick one boss and everybody burns the one. The reason you do that is if you don't get both of them down before they finish overdrive mode, they both will heal. So if you get them both relatively low and then push one of them, hopefully you can kill the one you focused before it finishes the cast, so only one of them heals, and you only have one of those big AoEs. So now they're going to start their overdrive mode cast. We're pushing Aivela first, so we're going to kill her before that cast goes out, which is helpful. Now Avela's going to get hers off because she has a lot more health, which is fine. Now we're just going to burn. Now they do this overdrive energy burst, which is this AoE that is kind of both colors at once. We'll continue to get wiper beams. So again, you just match the color. It usually isn't a one-shot. So here I actually didn't match the color. And you see I took some damage. Didn't kill me, but again, you don't want the group doing that if you can help it. You pop all your adrenals, your raid buffs, and whatever, and you just focus them down. If you do get that AoE, make sure to get it out of the group, because it does, not only can you not mitigate it, but it's buffed. So it'll do more damage as well as not being able to mitigate it. But you just burn them down, and you're all good. So that's really it, everyone. It's a very straightforward fight in story mode. Match the colors, match the colors, match the colors is really the name of the game. Otherwise, it's largely just a tank and spank. The better you are about positioning and pulling your circles out of the group, taking those conals to the side, matching those big radiant circles and all that stuff is all great. And the better you do that, the better. But honestly, as long as you're careful about matching colors, this is a really, really easy fight. So hopefully this helped everyone watching this be a little more comfortable with the fight. I know this fight can be very, very confusing because there's so much stuff going on. And a lot of that is because there are a lot of mechanics here present that matter a lot more in hard mode. And so this can also be a good fight as you see those mechanics to kind of practice and get better at those things, which make the story mode version easier, although it's relatively easy. But anyway, hope this is helpful. Good luck in Gods. Really, really fun operation. Thanks for watching. Hope this is helpful, and good luck.